going on, everybody? And welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics. Cole and Blake coming at you. Cole coming at you live from Royal Athletic Park at Touchdown Pacific here in Victoria. Just pulled in this morning. Excited to see the grounds, see the field. It's looking pretty nice so far. It's obviously a lot more empty than we hope tomorrow. But Blake, it's getting exciting now that we are here. I am boots on the ground, if that's what you want to call it. But buddy, how are you doing? And thanks for joining me.
Yeah, doing good. It's going to be an exciting time tomorrow. Someone else tweeted, and I forget the name, but it's like someone else, a quick tidbit here. Someone tweeted, is this the first time the Lions have played on grass in like a home game, that is, a home game on grass in like 40, 50 years? Like, it's been a long time since the Lions played a home game on grass.
Forgive me, but what was Tempire? Was it not grass? I
I
wasn't
thought I
too
thought it
familiar.
was grass too, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay, I did get to go to one game at Tempire, obviously temporary Empire Field there at the Peony, but I don't remember seeing as that well over a decade now if it was grass or artificial turf. But that is a interesting little tidbit for sure. Obviously, we got a little bit of news about some kicking changes there as well. So we'll see how the grass comes into play. But Blake, let's get into it, buddy. A little bit of a BC Lions preview here. Not wanting to spend too much time talking Lions, seeing as that, we talked a bit about it on the weekly show, but obviously we actually broke the news on the weekly show, Shane, that is, with the news that Matthew Betts was returning from the NFL. I think that's probably where we should start. We talked a little bit about it on the weekly show about hopefully him having an impact and all that, but what are your thoughts overall, buddy? And how do you think maybe Matthew Betts can transition a little bit easier than Nathan Rourke has?
Yeah, I think it's a really good signing for the BC Lions. That's kind of obvious, but it's a really good signing for the Lions here. I mean, you just talked about it. The depth chart was released today. There was a few things that kind of caught my eye. I guess since we're talking about them, the first one that I'll go over is that Coach Campbell is not scared. He's putting him right into the starting lineup. Like Betts has the walkthrough today, and he's like, you know what? That's good enough. You're going right into the starting lineup. Matthew Betts is going to start. Similar to last week, Christian Covington will not start. Josh Banks takes his spot on the D line, at least as a starter. The secondary is unchanged. So we kind of saw our man Darsh. He's kind of put a prediction, if you will, out that he thinks Matthew Betts will get a sack in the very first quarter tomorrow. So
Wow.
I'm not too sure if that'll come true, but I think it can only, like I talked about on the weekly show, I think it can only really help the Lions. It's no secret their defense hasn't been good enough during this 5 game losing streak. And to be quite frank, they weren't even good enough during the 5-1 start that the Lions had. The Lions were just simply outscoring their defensive problems. And I think defenses that have adjusted to them lately, they haven't been able to outscore their problems. And that's why they haven't been getting wins lately.
Yeah, man, and I think it, like you mentioned, it can't not help. I think it has to do a little bit of affect this defense. Hopefully, give them a nice shot in the arm, which I'm interested to see. I think we've been, not accustomed to seeing the secondary struggle as much as they have this year. But I think the addition of a guy like Matthew Betts, hopefully, he can get some pressure on the quarterback, get Drew Brown off his platform, get the ball out of his hands that much faster, and I think that helps the secondary, the back end, not having to cover for so long, which I was pretty critical online last week during the Ottawa Redblacks game that there was no pass rush getting home. Drew Brown was sitting back there, oftentimes going through 2, 3 of his reads and his progression. And I think a guy like Matthew Betts, known pedigree in the CFL, obviously what was it, 18 sacks last season, broke the Canadian record. So I think he transitions a little bit easier than Nathan Rourke. Now, that being said, I don't know if I'm going to go out as far as Darsh and predict a first quarter sack, but I think we can see maybe a sack or two this game. Hopefully, he gets into a little bit of a rhythm there into the second half and when it's meaningful downs. I'm also curious to see if he lines up and there's no offside penalties called on Matthew Betts coming from the Canadian or the American game. But I think all jokes aside, he'll transition very well. That yard off the ball won't affect him too much. And I'm just interested. I think he's going to have to be a catalyst to kind of spark this unit. Hasn't really been playing the best football all year, but like I mentioned last week on the weekly show, they did have 3 turnovers in the first half, but just the lack of complementary football, the offense wasn't able to capitalized as probably as much as they'd hoped. So let's continue on the defense. And you mentioned it there earlier on the CFF Twitter and X accounts that there were some changes in the depth chart into the starting lineups. Let's start with a few of those moves. Let's start with TJ Lee moving to the Sam linebacker position. Obviously, spent a majority of his career playing at that boundary halfback position. He moves inside of that Sam linebacker position. Not too much of a different role from him. He'll obviously go to the field side of the field, so the longer side of the field with the longer hashes out there. But he'll mostly be a coverage linebacker in that Sam position. Obviously, being a linebacker, he'll be, you know, not oftentimes, but a few times I would imagine they'll get him into the box there, and he'll have to be more responsible in his run duties and stuff like that. So maybe having to tackle a little bit more, we might have to see from TJ Lee. But other than that, he'll kind of be business as usual. I think he's transitioned back into the starting lineup actually pretty well, considering coming off the injury. And Adrian Green, we saw, has been placed back to the safety position where we saw him for I believe, 6 of the first starting games. And the secondary obviously getting a little bit banged up. He's transitioned to playing a little bit of half, getting back to his position that I thought he was playing. Actually, I know people have been pretty critical of both Patrice Renee and Adrian Green the last few weeks, but I thought he had had himself a quietly decent start to the year. I know there was a lot of higher expectations. We talked to him obviously earlier in the season going in, and I think maybe not met is I feel like not the right word, but I think a little bit underperformed in terms of what we maybe were anticipating. Ryan Phillips was obviously speaking highly of him, thinking of all-star caliber type season. I don't think he's had that, but I thought he's played just fine when he's been at safety. And then Manny Rugamba is going to shift to that boundary halfback position, and Ronald Kent slots into the starting lineup once again. He's going to play the field halfback position. So Blake, from those few, the
Oh, no, we got you. Yeah, no, yeah, I got what you were saying there, Cole. I'm really interested to see what those changes are like. As one change that you didn't mention that I was kind of hoping you would, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Ace Ely is also slotting back into the starting lineup. I'm not sure if he was there last week. I didn't notice. Um, but I'm interested to see kind of the rejigging of the entire secondary, really, as it's not necessarily a rejigging of the starting lineup, but it's a rejigging of where players are playing. As you mentioned, TJ Lee moving to the field side. And we've noticed in the first couple of weeks that he's been back, Nathan Rourke has struggled with those longer throws to the field side. So I think that can only help TJ Lee. He's a ball hawking defender. And if he can break on those routes by Drew Brown, maybe get an interception or two, that could really set up the Lions well for the rest of the game. I think you're muted, Cole. Nothing. As Cole just deals with some technical difficulties here. So we will go over, or at least I will go over to the offensive side here momentarily. As Cole mentioned a little bit earlier on in the show, Carl Meyer has been given the starting nod for the punting duties over Stefan Flintoff. So he will handle the punting duties tomorrow afternoon, I should say. And as well, another quick note on the offense is that uh, BA looks like his knee injury has still not fully healed yet. Coach Campbell had alluded to earlier that he was going to be the backup, or at least that was the plan for the Lions here this week in Victoria. Unfortunately, that will not be the case as VA. It looks like his knee injury isn't progressing as well as the Lions would like. He will be the emergency quarterback, I can confirm did not make the trip to Ottawa last week, so I do not know what would have happened if, gosh forbid, that Nathan Rourke and Chase Bryce had gotten injured. But I would expect him to be on the trip here this weekend. Chase Bryce will, however, back up Nathan Rourke once again this week. Not really any other changes on the offense. Justin McInnes, Alex Hollins, Aiden Eberhardt will get the start over Stanley Berryhill, and David Mackey will be the short yardage back as always, as well as William Stanback getting the start at running back. As unfortunately Cole is still dealing with some technical difficulties. On the defensive side, we already mentioned it. Matthew Betts making his return. Ace Ely. Manny Regumba. Manny Regumba really had a hard game last week. He had the illegal contact that took away the Lions sack after the Jalen Acklin injury. Unfortunately for Jalen Acklin and the Ottawa Redblacks, he will not be playing in Touchdown Pacific, nor will Braylon Addison. So the Red Blacks are dealing with some injury trouble here on their side. I believe Khalil Pimpleton will, however, make his return. We know that Rock Armstead will be the running back for the Red Blacks. Of course, Drew Brown will start for the Red Blacks. Still no sound from Cole as we work through the technical difficulties. This is what happens when you go live, folks, so bear with us momentarily. Oh, I hear you now, Cole. Sounds like
No,
you're
I
back.
can't hear you though.
As we apologize, folks, but that's what happens when you go live. Sometimes you have some technical difficulties. We were just talking momentarily here about some of the changes on the offense, as you had already mentioned, Cole. Um, Carl Meyer moving to starting punter, and VA being the third string quarterback instead of backing up.
I don't know why I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep,
No?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me now? Perfect. Well, crisis averted. I don't know if the wind canceling will be as good. You might hear a little bit of this sweeper behind me, unfortunately, folks. But we'll cut this a little bit shorter. We'll kind of make it we'll wrap things up. But offensively, I think it comes down to obviously Nathan Rourke and the offense performing and obviously scoring a little bit more. I mentioned on the weekly show about them going 2 for 5 in the red zone. Hopefully, you guys are able to hear me okay as this machine kind of brushes by me. But I think just finishing more in the red zone and Nathan Rourke looking a little bit more comfortable. I'm curious to see, whether he wants to admit it or not. QB controversy, I think is the wrong thing to say, but there's got to be a little bit of pressure. Vernon Adams has obviously been at practice once again. And I think, they lose this game. You have to kind of pivot to, unfortunately, to Nathan, it kind of puts them into a shitty situation because you're going back and forth. But with the season on the line with loss here tomorrow, I really feel like you have to go back to the guy that you've had a little bit of success. Obviously, I don't want to say critical of Vernon Adams, but there was a little bit of a slump there towards the injury versus Winnipeg with the loss to Calgary, getting shut out to Winnipeg, and then the injury happens there late into the fourth quarter to Winnipeg. So even though VA struggled a little bit towards before his injury there, he was the MOP, and still I think it's kind of tough to say that the front running MOP candidate, but I think was in that conversation up until his injury. So I'm curious to know how that kind of affects that dynamic and hopefully fuels Nathan even more. But what are your thoughts offensively, Blake? I apologize if you guys kind of went over this. I wasn't able to hear you. I was battling through the technical difficulties. But what are your thoughts offensively, other than Nathan Rourke and company?
Yeah, no, all good, Cole. We did go over the offense just a little bit during the technical difficulties. The one thing that I did mention, the thing that I also noticed on the depth chart, I know that Coach Campbell had mentioned he was hoping VA would be okay to back up this week. That is not going to be the case. So my thoughts on that is that unfortunately, his knee injury isn't progressing as quickly as the Lions would have hoped. He will be the emergency third string quarterback, and I would expect him to make the trip to Victoria. I
Uh,
know he
can confirm he's here.
Yeah, so I know he did not make the trip to Ottawa. So I was just saying I don't know what would have happened in a worst case scenario if Nathan Rourke and Chase Bryce had gotten injured. Luckily, the Lions didn't have to deal with that, but he'll be the third string quarterback. So if he's not healthy to back up yet, I wouldn't be too worried if I'm Nathan Rourke. I would say he's probably another week or two away from game action, especially since he was only limited in practice this week. But I would agree that Nathan's probably starting to feel the pressure. He did not have a good start in week number one that he was back. He was better last week, but he still wasn't great. You mentioned it a couple times earlier today and on the weekly show. 2 for 5 red zone efficiency. That's just not good enough if you're a CFL team. And Nathan knows that. He knows that he's going to have to make those out throws a little bit better. All 3 of his interceptions so far have been on those out throws, and it's just not good enough for Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions. As we mentioned, Justin McInnes made a triumphant return back last week, but Alex Hollins, he just has not been good enough for the past over a month now, and I think he really needs to pick it up for the Lions to get a win here tomorrow.
Sorry, folks. I wish I could get a better view, but there's a friend of the show, Nick Kowalski, actually right there filming on the field. If you guys can see, I don't believe you guys can, but I love that you mentioned Alexander Hollins. He was somebody that I wanted to mention as well. He's actually right there, but a guy that we talked about, or well, I guess I talked a bit about him on social media. One of the highest paid receivers in the CFL. I believe he's up there, but in the top 5 in terms of paid salaries. So I think a guy that I'd like to see perform here this weekend, and he's been in a little bit of a slump, some uncharacteristic drops that have been kind of he's been making them almost routinely now. Unfortunately, here the last few weeks. And I remind people he had a 200-yard game there earlier in the season. Was one of the leading receivers up there with Justin McInnes. So he still has that in them. I think he's just in a little bit of a slump, and I think if he can bust out of it, hopefully that starts to fuel the offense, and that adds just one more weapon to Nathan Rourke. Lastly, offensively, I don't think you guys talked about it, and I know you've been pounding the table just as much, or just as probably longer than I have, with feeding William Stanback, getting that run game going. Obviously, we've seen him perform here the last 2 weeks. I believe 85 yards rushing and then 100 yards last week has been a very big weapon for the Lions offensively. You can throw in the ball, which Nathan Rourke has been doing as well, and he's an extra added weapon out of the backfield. So I think he has to be a factor here again tomorrow to just take that pressure off of Nathan Rourke, get them into second manageables, not feel like he has to throw on every down. And I think if you can get 4 or 5 yards of carry, set them up in a second manageable, Nathan's going to be able to find the open receiver. That's usually where he excels a little bit more in that quicker passing game, which we haven't really seen too much. We saw a little bit of that quick passing game come back into play last week in that first quarter, but from then on out, it was kind of quiet from the offense in terms of that quick game, getting the ball out of their hands, and that sort of stuff. So, any thoughts on William Stanback and wanting to see him be effective in the Lions offense?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought up William Stanback because he's had 3 really good games. He had 89 yards rushing against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the home game a couple weeks ago. He had 100 yards, or no, sorry, 89 against the Elks a couple weeks ago in Edmonton, 100 yards against the Bombers in the last home game. And I believe he went over 100 yards again last week, or it was just under, might have been 95 yards. So he's had 3 really good weeks. He's starting to slowly make his way up the CFL rushing leaderboard. Of course, Brady Oliveira still leads that. No surprise there. But he's slowly making his way up. And I agree with you, Cole. I think if the Lions can open up the run game, as you mentioned, get 4 or 5 yards of carry, that only helps them. Because if you're into 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, then maybe you can take those deep shots where guys like Alex Hollins and Justin McInnes can beat their defenders and get those long stretch plays that the Lions have been so sorely missing during this losing streak.
Yeah, man. You mentioned Justin McInnes there, and we saw him, be a big time weapon in the first quarter. There, I believe 4 or 5 receptions for 74 yards. But after that point, I believe it was one reception for 5 yards total. So we kind of seen a glimpse of Justin McInnes back on the scene. But I think I'd love to see more from him. There was a 150-yard game I think to be had there, and just weren't able to capitalize on the opportunities last week. But offensively, I think to close things out, Blake. Not much to be said about the offensive line. No changes. I was interested to see if Chris Slugger was going to get slotted back into the starting lineup, and potentially if Tyler Packer was going to maybe move over to guard. Like we've said all along, hard to bench or move somebody out with that being Michael Couture. I know Farhan's tweeted a couple times. They were undefeated, I believe, with Chris Slugger in the lineup at left guard. He's been kind of out of the lineup now. I know Farhan's also been vocal about it online that he is healthy enough to be active on game day, still isn't. So I think, I've said it a few times. I think he's an added dimension to that offensive line that is missing in terms of, nastiness, a little bit of grittiness in the offensive line to, get a little bit grimy in there. I know Suk Chung's probably a catalyst for that category, but I think just having another guy like that can kind of set the tone, be there for his teammates is just that much better. I did see Tyler Packer for the first time, kind of watching him since he's been into the starting lineup. Did kind of struggle last week. Gave up a few sacks, a few pressures in there as well. So interested to see how long they keep kind of this offensive line together, even though it's struggled a little bit with guys like, Andrew Pearson still in the wings. David Neville, I believe, is listed as the sixth offensive line. But, you have a guy like Andrew Pearson who, loved by his teammates, has been in the organization now. And a guy like Chris Slugger is also adored by his teammates. And this is obviously his first year with the team. But any thoughts from the offensive line in terms of it's the same unit and maybe some of those guys that are waiting in the wings?
Yeah, well, I will quickly touch on Andrew Pearson. I was able to very briefly talk to him after the game last week, and he was saying that he wants to get back in there. Like, he's a football player. He wants to get back in. He thinks he's in the best shape of his football career, and so that can only help the Lions. Obviously, there's so many offensive linemen on the roster. You can only play so many. So it's kind of a balancing act for Coach Campbell. I don't think the offensive line was really the problem last week or for a majority of this losing streak. I know we harped on them a bit earlier in the season. We didn't think that they were doing enough. I think they've been better lately. I think it's a lot more defensive problems than it is problems on the offensive line and the offense in general.
Yeah, okay. So just to close things out, we mentioned Stephen Myers is going to be Carl Myers. I combined the two. Carl Myers is going to be taking over for Stephen Flintoff for the punting duties. I heard you mention that when I was having some technical difficulties. We talked about the defense. We talked about the offense. Not much more to be said, Blake. It's time to produce on the field. I'm going to throw Blake under the bus here. Remind Lions fans, he picked against the BC Lions here today, I guess tomorrow. So if you guys see him, make sure you guys give him crap. You guys will see me later today at the festivities down in the Victoria Harbor. Hoping to do some content down there. So if you guys see me, come say hi. I'd love to do something with you guys. You can come some bench cut and I forget the other one. Start bench cut. And then blind ranking. So doing some content this weekend. Blake will join me tomorrow once he gets here on to the island. A little bit of roles reversed. He has to come see me instead of me going to see him. But man, like I said, time to nut up or shut up if you're the BC Lions. I mentioned on the weekly show, I know it might have been a little bit dramatic, but with the loss, I think the season is kind of falling out of our fingertips before
Yep.
we know it. Even with a loss tomorrow, you go on a win streak. I think you're going to have to beat you're going to have a better record than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to be over them in a playoff seeding. Losing the season series to them, obviously we have it over Saskatchewan, I believe. So Saskatchewan isn't too much of a worry, but I just don't want to go back into Winnipeg if it's a West semifinal once again. I don't have the confidence that this last team, even with I've joked with you back and forth about the Bombers hater in you, and I've said it all along. I think the Bombers are a good team. I just don't think they're the championship caliber team that we've seen from them without a Dalton Schoen, without a few of these guys. Adam Biggs, I believe, plays on the 6-game injury list. He's getting up there, and we've seen in the last few years that he's not been able to stay healthy for a full 18. So as great of a player as he is, he's not, being able to stay as healthy, and he's not quite the player that he was in his prime. So I think the Bombers are still limited, in a few areas. They're a good team with championship caliber pedigree. So I think they're just going to be one of those teams that you don't want to see come playoff time. So I'd rather see them in BC Place with the elements in our favor, with the crowd in our favor. And I think the Lions have to start with a victory tomorrow. So Blake, like I said on the weekly show, the Lions have to play like the more desperate team tomorrow. And obviously Ottawa's a good football team, and they're not going to give it to us, and the Lions are going to have to take it. But to close things out, Blake, any final thoughts for the people before we close things out for a BC Lions preview here at Touchdown Pacific?
No, I would just agree with you, Cole. I even said that last week. I said that I was getting very frustrated at that game in Ottawa. Of course, I was live and in person for that game. And I said the same thing. I said if the Lions lose tomorrow, I feel like the season is slowly slipping away. They would be confirmed third place, of course, depending on what happens in that Calgary Edmonton game later in the week. Even if they win, they cannot move back into first place because either Winnipeg or Saskatchewan will keep first place for the week. If Winnipeg wins, of course, they hold the tiebreaker. And if Saskatchewan wins, they have that tie. So I think a win, it's almost, we joked about it all season that Labor Day is the kind of unofficial kickoff to the CFL season. And I think it's almost a must-win game for the BC Lions tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of distraction. It's going to be a lot of pageantry, but the Lions are. It was said on Twitter by a friend of the show, Andy Fontana. The Lions shouldn't take this as a sightseeing tour. It's a business trip. Yeah, it's a home game. Yeah, you're in Victoria, but it's a business trip. You're there to get the win, and that is the most important thing for the BC Lions.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what Nathan Rourke mentioned as well in his media availability. I believe yesterday morning at Starlake Stadium here in, I guess not here, but in Langford, BC. He mentioned that this is a business trip. They're here to get a W. I hate that you mentioned the Labor Day thing, because I've always kind of joked with especially Elks fans, friend of the program, Daryl, being an Elks fan, he always mentions about the season not starting till Labor Day. Now that's kind of the roles reversed, where I'm like, the season doesn't start till Labor Day anyways. The Lions can get their shit together and we can go on a run here. So I'm going to cop out. I'm going to say the Lions are going to, get their shit together here tomorrow, get a victory. Should be a close victory. Ottawa is no slouch, and they're going to be a good ball club that are very motivated to spoil the party. But I think this is time for the Lions to, start to, get on the right path again and go on to this historic run and hopefully get to that home Grey Cup. So, Blake, I think that's going to close things out for us today, buddy. Live from Touchdown Pacific, where there should be a sold out 14,000 plus here. Hoping to bring the energy. If you guys are watching here and you guys have tickets, get down here, experience this. If you guys are in Victoria already, down to the harbor here tonight for the, I believe, the festivities that are going on from noon to 7 p.m. tonight. And then I believe the gates open here at 2 p.m. tomorrow. There should be some, tailgating, I would imagine, or some sort of, place for you guys to gather. So get out here. Get at me and Blake on social media. Blake on Twitter or X is Blake 3653. I'm at
Yep.
Cole McGarvey. You guys can find us at _CF Fanatics on Twitter. Then on Instagram, you can find Blake at bmilton97. You can find me at Cole McGarvey. You can find the Canadian Football Fanatics at Canadian Football Fanatics. Blake, I think that's all the reminders, buddy. Last one, like, comment, smash the subscribe button for us. We really appreciate that. I believe we're at 235 subscribers now. And Blake, we are closing in on 1,000, 1K on Instagram. I believe we're at
Let's
946
go.
before I checked here. So Instagram's really killing it. And hopefully you guys can catch up on YouTube. 945 people following us on Instagram. We need to catch up on YouTube, guys. I need about 600 you guys to subscribe. But all love, guys. If you guys are here, or if we see you guys tonight, please come up to us. We'd love to shoot some little bit of content with you guys, and stay tuned. I am a official vlogger, starting my vlogging career this weekend. They're going to do a little vlog series of the weekend, stuff like that. You'll see Blake's beautiful face in that this weekend. But like I mentioned, come say hi. Maybe we'll get me in the vlog if we're filming. But Blake, that'll do it for us for BC Lions preview live from Royal Athletic Park. Blake is live from his living room, I'm guessing. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you guys on the next one.